Hello, how are you? We're just waiting to start here. Thank you for coming. Um, it's been a while since I've done this. All right, we got the chats going. Let's see here. Um, okay. All right, hopefully you can mute or unmute and control your own video. Um, so we're good for that. Okay. All right, we got a minute left. So hopefully you're having a good day. I don't know where you're coming from, but it's cloudy here. It's humid. We're supposed to have thunderstorms later today. So that should be interesting. Can I share? Here. Alrighty. Okay. Thank you for coming. You can see everything okay, right? I just want to make sure that, oops, we gotta go back. Whoop, I just totally logged. Gotta love it. All right, we got a chat. Okay, cool. Wonderful. I just want to downsize this a little bit so I can see what's going on. Cool. All righty. Well, thank you for coming and on this Sunday afternoon. And so I don't know if you were following any of the newsletters that I had posted earlier this week or hopped over to the Patreon membership area. I had posted a article also on Medium about this incredible book that I happened to stumble upon this last week with a friend of mine. We were out to lunch, and there was a an antique store that is an old factory. It used to be the axe factory, and it's massive, and it is now an antique place. And vendors have different stalls, and there was everything in this place. Very old, very dusty. And the first book I found was this book here, um, Creating Wildflower Garden, and it says at the top, the country diary of. And I looked at it. I'm always a sucker for herb books. I think we need to start collecting out of print herb books. I think it's important now more than ever that we continue to have these books, because let's be honest, ChatGPT or Wikipedia or some of this stuff online loses the essence of these books. They kind of summarize a lot of this stuff. And these authors, back in the day, was these authors, they just, you just wasn't like anybody who could just publish a book. They had to have some kind of credibility. And so I really like these books. I have a lot of them. I'm in the process of building my shelves for my new library because I've moved. So yeah, so I found this book first, and then an hour later, I'm on the second floor, and I found this book. And this is the companion to this book. And what are the odds you're going to find that? So I didn't know anything about this author. But her book is beautiful, absolutely beautiful. This is happens to be a first edition, and it's beautiful. It really has some beautiful pictures. She's quite an artist. Here's some of the picture artwork that she's done, and you can look her up online. So that's how this whole thing got started. And being a history major, I always got to throw in a little storytelling in with learning about herbs. So let's get started. So again, this is a legal disclaimer. Everything that we talk about is for informational purposes only. I'm not here to treat, diagnose anybody. So, what would it feel like to walk through the same woods every day for a year, not only not to change them, but to have them change you? Now, as a gardener, as a farmer, I'm always looking at landscapes. I'm always thinking, what can I put here? What can I put there? But what would happen if we just stopped and just let the woods speak to us? Um, that I think that's a different look, and that's what Edith was became known for. She is best known for this book, The Country Diary of an Edwardian Lady. She lived in the 1900s, but her actual diary, wasn't discovered until 1977, when it was in some dusty old cottage. Somebody, I guess it was would be her husband's family. Her and her husband never had children. And so somebody found her diary and was absolutely taken aback at how beautiful it was. And so they had it published in 1977, even though it was written in 1908. And that's when this book became, well, became well known in after her death, unfortunately. So one of the things that Edith was pretty cool about is that her quiet devotion, phenological, which is a noticing what's bloomed, ripened, nends, is a type of observation, versus emotional journaling, which is kind of what we do more of today. How you feel. um we want to, in fact, in my kind of journaling, I kind of like I imagine what my future is like. I don't talk about the day to day. I don't talk about what's going on in the past. I always visualize what the future is going to be, and my journal is a representation of what that day would look like in the future. And that's from Dr. Benjamin Hardy, his work that he's done in organizational psychology. But she was different. She just wrote about what she saw, which is, back in the day. Well, today it's different. So I wanted to read an excerpt. If you have questions, just type in the chat or comments. Let me know. I just don't want to keep talking. This is supposed to be a conversation. So please feel free to ask your questions as I peruse this book. So I wanted to take and April seems to be a very popular month. I think she has like 21 pages. I counted each page. Now the spring, you could tell that she was very, very, she loved the spring. As the year progresses, she gets less and less. The pages become a little less, but she does about 6 or 7 pages. Some months she does at least 21. So she starts out with some poems that she didn't write. She has E.B. Browning, The Cry of Children. The young lambs are bleating in the meadows. The young birds are chirping in the nest. The young fawns are playing with the shadows. The young flowers are blowing toward the west. Go out, children, from the mine and from the city. Sing out, children, as the little thrushes do. Pluck your handfuls of meadow cowslips, pretty, laugh aloud to feel your fingers, let them through. And she's got she's got another poem from about the to the cowslip from Alfred Hayes. Of the spring joys, the dearest is the drink they breathe again. Freshest of the flowers, the bluebell lights the corpse. The primrose paves the glen, but thy frank beauty overtops in open fields. So, cowslips is a beautiful flower. I don't think it's medicinal. She has a picture. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Does she have primrose? No, I can't find it. Well, I have another one that she talks about. So, her first day, April 1. Very still gray day. I went out a little spiny to see a large bush of the great round-leaved willow, which is a perfect picture, just corpse like the hundreds of little fairy lamps. The bees are humming all around. It's busy gathering the pollen. And so she has pictures, of eggs, of what they look like, the tadpoles, and she's drawn some other beautiful images. Primrose is actually medicinal. She has woodbine, or the windflower. They call it the dogwort. And then she goes on. Now, which is interesting is that she talks about the wood crowfoot. Now, the crowfoot I thought was an interesting plant because this guy here, our friend Jonathan Andrews, he goes through, this book is the companion. So he explains the plants in her book and their medicinal and any folklore. And to my surprise, wood crowfoot was it's called Goldilocks, Gold Cup, Gold Knobs, King's Cup, or Leopard's Foot. And it is a close relationship to the buttercup, and it resembles the leaves to that of a crow. Crowfoot was an early name for the buttercup. It was noted for its caustic properties, and more than one source relates how the ancients used the sap of the crowfoot to smear the points of their arrows to make them poisonous. The root of another double version of the crowfoot, known as St. Anthony, was also considered to be a cure for the plague and lunacy. Culpeper did not consider the crowfoot beneficial except to raise blisters. Now, Culpeper, he is an industry name. I don't know if you know who Culpeper is, but he was the first doctor. He was a medical doctor in the turn of the century, and he actually wrote the first book about herbs. And this is kind of where in Western herbalism, where that is like the foundation. He was into the humoral system, and which is, bile, a lot of that stuff now is, we don't practice that because we have science to back up some of the, our conditions versus the humoral system, which is more observation. So, they did, beggars in the Middle Ages are thought to have smeared their sores with the sap to elicit more sympathy. But the crow's foot is still dangerous to cattle and to man in some degree. So here's this beautiful flower. Okay. This beautiful, beautiful buttercup flower, and it's deadly. I mean, talk about extremes. And then we have dead nettle. Okay, so I don't know if you know about dead nettle, but dead nettle happens to grow prolifically here in the Northeast. I don't know where you are, but dead nettle actually is a can be um, it's the stinging nettle, so that's his cousin. So also talks about dead nettle, and yep, I have it right here. So here's her beautiful picture of dead nettle, and the difference between dead nettle, and you can find it. Sometimes it looks like a mint, but it has a square. That's how you know it's dead nettle, because it has a square stem. None of the other mints have a square stem. So if you look at the beautiful flowers and then the square stem, I think it's here in the Northeast, it's a weed. But I like to go out in the early spring because that's the best time to harvest it. And I pull it up and I add it to salads. It's great with minerals. It's high in minerals. It's one of the best free salads. Now, Andrews says that whilst the dead nettles do not have the same reputation as the stinging nettle for medicinal or culinary purposes, they were used for a number of ailments. The efforts were astringent and diuretic, with the white dead nettle being particularly sought after for female disorders, which is true. It does help tonify our uterine. Today it is used in homeopathy for kidney complaints, although dead nettle can be eaten in similar ways to the stinging nettle. Perhaps the most charming manner was the ancient habit of appeal to children. Um, they picked the white, and this is something I didn't know, and this is why it's great to collect these old books. Um, they picked the white flowers and sucked them to extract the honey within. This led to the country name of suck bottle. One other country name which becomes clear when the flowers of dead nettle are looking at closely was, excuse me, Adam and Eve in a bower. Two black stamens hang on from the topmost hooded lip, which is the flower, then turned upside down. So that was interesting. I didn't know that this was the honey. You could suck on the flowers. Excuse me. Um, so those are the differences. When you're out looking for flowers or plants and you're on a walk in the woods, or even in your garden, having an understanding of the wood crowfoot or the dead nettle. These are all things that we learn as we go along. Dead nettle I've known about for years, but again, here today I learned something new. One, one plant can be very deadly, and the other plant is the most nourishing food that you could possibly eat. It's high in minerals, just like nettles is. So one of the things that I really appreciated about her book is that she uses observation versus imagination. How do you observe your environment? I tend to feel my way through life, versus observe, because I'm just that kind of personality. Some people are very black and white. They see, they they observe, and they just, I don't know if you remember some of the old detective stories, just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. That was an old, it was a Adam 12 or some other old movie or TV show that was on in the 70s and 80s. Um, so, how do you observe your environment? Do you write what you see? Or do you feel? Do you record what's actually there, or do you wish that were there? Now, that's kind of like what I do, is that I tend to say, I tend to embellish a little bit, but she was not. She spent a great deal of time just picturing, painting the landscapes of the area that she lived in, and she did this on a daily basis. So as an herbalist, we live by our senses, but we also need to look at what's what's in front, the facts. We need to look at how is that plant growing in its environment? Is it being crowded? Is it shade? Is it sun? What other plants are growing around that particular herb? Um, lavender. I grew a ton of lavender. So, I was always watching it in the early spring. Did the flowers, they tend to die back during the winter. And I was always looking for the life, just a hint of life. There was some of the branches would always end up dying off, but then you always watch and you keep looking and you keep observing and you see the little leaves coming back, and then you see the flowers come up, and are they open, are they closed? Lavender has a particular it has a high, at least the lavender augustifolia has high essential oil content. So you had to wait and observe until those little buds were just about ready to open. That was when it was at its peak. And I'd also note the time of year. I knew that it was somewhere between June and the first week of July. But as the years progressed, I noticed that the harvesting was earlier and earlier in the year, and in June versus end of June, early July, which I thought was fascinating. So by the time I moved, lavender could be harvested in the second to third week of June versus July, which is, I think that's part of our environment, global warming, things like that. Same with lemon balm. Lemon balm doesn't grow well in the sun. Lemon balm likes to grow semi-shaded along the woods. It doesn't do well in high heat. And so I would watch that lemon balm. It would die back and then it would come back. And so it seemed like every other year was a biannual. So every other year, some years I'd have these big, massive plants, and then other years they were just stay these little shrubbery things, and they wouldn't bloom after you cut them. So lemon balm also tends to get rust on its leaves as the summer progresses, and it also goes to seed. So when you want to harvest your lemon balm, the taste does change as it goes through the hot summer season. So you want to pick again your lemon balm in the early summer versus late summer. You can still harvest it, but it's not going to have that strong lemony flavor that it has. So are there any plants that you saw last week? I mean, I'm not talking about online or in a book, but you saw with your own eyes. Um, I suggest you keep a physical sensory journal, and I have a PDF that I can give you. Um, I'll put it in the show notes. Let's see here. Can I? I'll do it later. I'll add it to the show notes. That way I don't hop out of here. Um, keep a physical journal. What do you see? What do you smell, touch, and not imagine? Don't imagine this beautiful, thriving plant. If it's sickly, then paint, note that it's not looking real well, and you know, maybe put in your notes, the time of year it is, and what the weather is like at that time. weather plays a big part in our success and plans. So Edith was really involved in the arts and crafts movement, which was big between the 1800s and 1920s. And it's interesting because today, back then, industrialization was becoming big. They were figuring out how to make machines to the cotton mills, the axe factory. I was just at an axe factory. All these, instead of artisans making these products by hand, by home looms and things like that, the thread factory. I mean, here in Connecticut, we got a zillion old factories. The Velvet Factory in Manchester. You've got Lowell, Massachusetts, which has the whole city of Lowell is old factories, turn of the century factories. And there was a movement against these mass production. Now everything that we have comes from China. And now we have these cottage industries where we're going back, instead of having factory meat, we're choosing to go to small producers, meat producers, small farmers markets, buying our produce from smaller producers. That is an outgrowth of the arts and crafts movement from the 1800s, early 1920s. It was an aesthetic rebellion against the industry, the revolution. We in England, these people were basically one craftsman, and it took a long time to make one product: a rug, sheets, flat fabric. Unfortunately, there was child labor, and they were bringing children in to run these factories. They were also giving work to the to people that had very little means to support themselves. You have in New York City, you have the Triangle Coat Factory that actually burned down, and that's how we got our own. The fire exits, the exits to the building were locked. They couldn't get out, and that's how a lot of these people had died. So arts and craft movement was a rebellion, a quiet rebellion. It was more emphasis on nature, handwork, and the beauty of everyday life. And it wasn't this big explosion. Unfortunately, it didn't last very long because now everything comes from China and it's dirt cheap. So William Morris was one of the big founders in England, and it eventually came over to here to the United States. He says, have nothing in your house that you do not know to be useful or believe to be beautiful. And I forgot the name of the gal that just wrote that book. What is it? She wrote that cleaning, decluttering book. Help me out here. I think she's Japanese. Um, Hang on. Let's see. It's on the tip of my tongue. Marie Kondo. Yes. So this is kind of, now we got a modern version of William Morris. Is it beautiful? Keep it. So there's a parallel there of Marie Kondo, while everybody's throwing away their junk that's not useful or meaningful in their life. That is a throwback to the crafts movement, arts and crafts movement. So Edith Holden was active in Birmingham art circles. Now, there's nothing that says that her and William knew each other, but there was definitely influence. Their lives did overlap, but I don't think he or she were in the same circles of the art scene. But you can see in scholars have reviewed her work, and they do see a heavily influenced by Morris's ideas of nature, handcraft, and intriguing beauty in everyday life. Prior to that, before the, back in the day was the Impressionist movement. Everybody was making portraits of people. They weren't making paintings of the of everyday life, a bowl of fruit or whatever. It would now, so this is another version of art, which is the arts and crafts, and she's trying to keep that movement going and trying to push back against the industrialization. So her botanical art equals seasonal curriculum. So if you look at her book, it is divided by months. Okay, she's got May, and then she talks about, what's going on in May, and then let's see. Saw some dog daisies in flower on the railway bank. My sister brought home some beautiful white meadow saffrage she had picked in some fields near Hatton. Common earth nut, black medic, and flower. May has been a cold, stormy month. So she's got flower of the beech, oak blossom, flower of the sycamore tree, holly, and maple. I mean, it's just gorgeous how she's, making observational notes. She saw dog daisies in flower on the railway bank. Okay. It's I saw meadow buttercup, large flowered bittercress. Bittercress again is another herb. You can eat that, has high minerals. So that's a food herb, what we call. May hawthorn berries. And isn't that beautiful? She just has just a beautiful way with her painting. And it just, here's June, the next month, and it's just absolutely stunning with the birds, which are these. These are willow warbler feeding her young. And she literally, I mean, back in the day, they didn't take pictures and go back home. She sat in a field for hours painting this. That's what they did back in the day. I mean, the time that she took, and I find it amazing. Here's milkwort, bed straw. Isn't this beautiful? Got beautiful flowers, butterflies, just gorgeous. So, this is her area in a month, and I really encourage, if you get to do a journal, an observation journal, to start, just do a year. And even if you have a balcony, you don't have a garden, you just have a deck or a balcony, put some flowers out there, see what's growing. Or if you have a park near you, go through the park and just observe what's around you, and then make a note of it. Here's July. Look at this beautiful dragonfly that she painted. Isn't this gorgeous? Just gorgeous. She really had a talent of drawing, and yet, you know, this kind of stuff is being lost. Whoops. This kind of stuff is being lost at the, we're not How many of us need to learn how to paint? I I'm not a painter. That's not my thing. So, as an herbalist, I mean, last summer, we need to look at the season. So, this is last summer, I was up in Vermont and I was taking herb classes. And, one of the things that I hear often when um, because I'm still learning, I still study herbs with other herbalists. And one of the things that we hear frequently is, oh my God, there's so many herbs. How do you remember everything? Simple, one plant at a time. So you purposely seek out ways to learn, to study. This is one of the ways, attending Zoom meetings, but also in person. I know plants, the Latin plants, botany is something that I'm weak on. To go out into the wild and to identify a plant is very hard for me to do because again, I've been book learning. I watch it online, but if you're in the wild and you're walking around, some things, because depending on the season, you'll miss. So this is me last summer. The plant with the little red roses, that's towards the end of the summer. And I did 4 weekends, one each month. We started in early spring and went through September. And that happens to be ginseng, and it's flowered. So you look at the red berries, you know that it fruits end of August, early September, and the leaves are now yellowing. And then we learn, these are the two instructors at Sage Mountain Herbs. And, we're learning how to use these herbs in the kitchen in real time. We go out to the woods, we harvest them, and then we come in to the kitchen and we learn how to use them properly. And so I'm hoping soon I'll be able to be doing something similar to this on the 15 acres that I just purchased in northern New England. So I'm hoping that we'll have the same demo gardens where we can go out into the field and we can start trying to learn how to identify the plants. And then we bring them back into the kitchen and we work with them and we learn how to use them. So one plant at a time, each year, just focus on one or two plants or a small handful. And every seasoned herbalist will tell you this. It's just that simple. Don't try and eat the whole elephant. Just start with a few plants that you're comfortable with. Learn how to learn about them as intently, just like lavender, just like lemon balm, just like ginseng. They're all very intimate for me personally. So, some herb of the month guidelines for journaling, like Edith did, was journal what you actually see, hear, and smell and touch. Um, Return to the same place each week or month. Let the land become your teacher. Focus on one or two plants per season. Sketch, describe, and get to know them. And include seasonal birds, weather patterns, and changes in the landscape. Do the plants thrive in direct sun? Do they thrive in shade? Do they require semi shade or not? And if you're not growing trees, medicinal trees, there's a ton of trees out there that are very medicinal that are widely available in your area. Pine trees, pine sap, hawthorn trees, they grow, they're huge. So if you're not able to grow your own stuff, you can go to parks, you can go to trails, go find a hiking trail and see what you can. Mullein grows wild. There's lots of plants that you can find out in the wild that are medicinal that you can learn about. All right. Is that a double? I guess so. Oh, I added an extra one in there. Okay, so part three is the feminine labor and herbal resistance. You know, Edith, unfortunately, her work was not considered to be um, provocative, I guess. It was dismissed. And this is the turn of the century. It was nice, it was pretty, it was feminine, it wasn't considered serious art. Sometimes we here, as herbalists, we're not considered, true healers. Yes, we don't have medical degrees, so most of us don't. But does that mean that the knowledge, the plant knowledge, and the history and the folklore are to be dismissed? I don't think so. Um, she became, unfortunately, at best, after death, she was devoted to the details of the seasons of life, which gives her diary is so powerful. Um, you know, she captured exactly what was growing at the time of season. And it's just amazing her plant knowledge. It's just her botany. I mean, she had to study a ton. I mean, all these are properly, I mean, look at this. Isn't this gorgeous? She has properly identified all these plants. How do you learn all that stuff? I mean, she had to have, you just don't wake up one day and say, wow, I know all these plants. She had to spend hours and hours and hours learning, talking to somebody. This is all handed down. I don't think that there were botany books back in the 1900s. Um, Somebody had to help her identify these plants. So again, this is her mother was a wonderful teacher, and she taught her daughters. They had seven siblings. So this just is amazing. You know, common nipplewort, and she even has the Latin name for it. I mean, it's just amazing the knowledge that she has in plants. So, Edith didn't marry young back when they were supposed to. Usually girls got married right in their early 20s, but instead she taught at a girls' school. It's a possibility, although there's no evidence to support it, but this could have been a project that she had for her students, that they were all supposed to be doing a diary, and have examples for her students. Um, Instead of dreamy journals, I don't think they had them. They even knew what they were back in the day. Maybe they did. I don't know. But she wanted to teach her students a kind of art of illustration that was real, and not, whatever the latest fad was back in the day, which her two sisters were illustrators, and that's what gave them they were more popular than Edith, and they were well published, and they were illustrators. Now, Edith did delay marriage until 39. She never had children. And she did continue her career. Back in the 1900s, girls were not allowed to work. They didn't have the right to vote. They were property of their father or their husband. And any money that they did make, I do not believe they were allowed to manage it. It had to have a male representative. But she lived in the artistic circles, and she was a working woman. And it wasn't normal. It was frowned upon. Again, women were expected to marry young. They have to dedicate their lives to domestic life and raising children. They did not have separate spheres of ideology. Their home was their husband, and that was it, public life. A woman who remained unmarried was often labeled a spinster or seen as a failure, a social failure. And she ended up being, caring for relatives, or in some instances, they joined the convent. They became a nun. How many people I've met? So many people that are in there within the church, the Catholic Church, where that's all they had. That was the options: teaching or becoming a nun. And in some cases, it was a family business. Maybe one or two ended up getting married and having children, but the rest of the siblings either became priests or nuns. I've seen that many times. So, working women, it was limited, it was very risky. Acceptable jobs for women were limited to teaching, nursing, or governess work. Artists, writers, spiritualists. Now, her parents were spiritualists. They like to hold seances, and again, this is the awakening of individuality. Back in the day, everything was regulated by the church. Now, the people are starting to kind of like do their own thing. They're not asking the church for permission to do what to do to live their life. They're just going directly to the source. Edith had four sisters. Four sisters. She's the only one who married, and she operated in the gray era because she still worked. Her husband was 7 years younger than her, and he was a sculptor. She did move from the countryside to London, and she had a little more freedom. Her sisters remained unmarried. At least there's no known records of them being married. They were in their own rights very famous. They were children's book illustrators. They often worked together, and they have more history that survives today than Edith does. But again, professional women were often seen as eccentric, lower status, or unwomanly, especially if it was a choice not to marry. But again, during the turn of the century, things were brewing, especially in the Edwardian era, like Edith, more permission to pursue creative intellectual lives. They were kind of quietly making a stand that they were going to remain independent, that they weren't going to lose themselves behind their husband. They were independent, they were educated, and but it did cost them socially. They were considered to be outcasts. Her sisters, again, they had to be under the rule of their either their brother. They had three brothers, so these women didn't have their own money. The money that they did make, the brothers managed it for them, which I think is kind of so. In Edith's case, marrying at 39 was highly unusual, and she continued to work, which was even more unusual. And to her, she stood her ground, just like her sisters did. Um, and again, they were considered outliers. And again, there's not a lot of information about the sisters. I couldn't find anything when they died. Just Edith, because she died of such a tragic death. She ended up drowning. She started complaining shortly after she was married for several years, and then she started complaining of headaches. And this is when lead was very prominent in our household. So I'm wondering whether she had some sort of cancer or some tumor thing going on. But she was complaining of her headaches, and she went down to the Thames River to an outlet of where there was like a marshy area. And there's speculation that she collapsed and fell into the water and unfortunately drowned. So, what does this got to do with herbalism and the feminists? Herbalism, it says your body is wise, your rhythms matter. Healing doesn't have to be patented, packaged, or approved by institutions that have ignored women for centuries. We struggle with this today. How many times we have studies done on for certain cancers or whatever, and it's done on men versus women. And a lot of our pharmaceuticals are based on studies for men done on men versus women. And so because we have different imbalances, more hormones than the guys do, it affects us differently. So in Edith's day, women's knowledge, especially about plants, bodies, birth, and healing, again, was dismissed as domestic folk or sentimental. But again, dismissal is not neutral. It's just, you can look at it as being political. We do matter. These things do matter. You practice herbalism today and you're reclaiming your autonomy from systems that profit off of your connection, rejecting the idea that healing only counts if it comes from a price tag or prescription, re-entering the feminine and the seasonal and intuitive and the slow, recentering. So that's why I like herbalism so much, is that it kind of gives me the knowledge that I need to be somewhat autonomous from the Western medical world. There's ways that you can, if you, just like Edith, if you do this on a daily basis, if you observe, turn on your observational skills, and you observe what is, you can absolutely head off a lot of problems later on that will, and if only if Edith had listened to the headaches her body was trying to tell her, maybe she needed glasses, who knows. But she may have lived longer than, I think she was in her 40s when she passed away. So anyway, so Edith pages remind us that knowledge doesn't have to be loud to last. A nature diary, a backyard tincture, a passed down recipe, they're not quaint. They survive because as women, we keep planting, we keep writing, we keep steeping and sharing like this. It's our quiet little resistance that, and reminder, that the world forgets. And that's why I want to keep these books. That's why I was so excited to share this with you, is because the world forgets these incredible women who took the time to paint these beautiful pictures, to document these plants and as they were. It's just, it's a treasure to find. And then to have this gentleman come along in the 1980s, take this woman's beautiful book and talk about, May and the dead nettles and, the details that we need today, the modern details that we need today. I find it fascinating, and I get super excited. And, I really love sharing this kind of stuff with you. And I hope, you enjoyed yourself listening to this. And let's see, can we stop sharing? Yep. So now, just a little reminder, the Thompson Street Farm is now the New England Herbary. We have a name change. The LLC still exists. Thompson Street Farm LLC is the legal name, But now everything has been moved to the New England Herbary and .com. I forgot to fix that. So it's .com. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to have meetings and share, sit at a table and share our love of herbs. And, we keep doing this. So, um, do you have any questions, my dear? If not, we got 5 more minutes. All right. So, having said that, I would just want to say thank you for coming. And I know that it's been a while since I did one of these Zoom meetings. I was busy moving. So now this is the studio. It's a little I have to fix it, so there'll be more, but this is the Connecticut studio that I'm in. Maybe next time I'll be up in New England in the on the farm, and you can check out the massive fields that I have that I have bees up there. That's about all I got right now. But there is it's just raw land. There's no infrastructure. There's nothing there. It's just an empty field waiting to be transformed into the herbery. So thank you for staying and coming, and I appreciate it. And I wish you a rest of a wonderful afternoon. I'll catch you later. Bye.